Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, the creator and host of our show. Today we welcome John Meese. John is an economist turned entrepreneur on a personal mission to eradicate generational poverty by helping entrepreneurs creating thriving businesses. He's also the author of Survive and Thrive. Today he shared, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. He also talked about, are you focused on input or output as an entrepreneur? And we're all time travelers. As we can't go back, we're moving forward. I know you're going to enjoy the episode today, so on to the ascent. Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso. I'm the creator and host of our show. And today we have an amazing guest. This is someone that I have followed for a number of years. I've watched his trajectory, been part of the organizations that he has been a part of, and I am just excited to have John Meese with us today. So welcome, John.
Pat, thank you so much for inviting me, honestly, to be here. It's a privilege and blessing to be here, and thanks to you for making this possible. And also, thank you for just doing the hard work of creating this platform to do this, because you're making the world a better place through just sharing good words from yourself and from others that you bring on. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. So let's talk about who John is. So John Meese is an economist turned entrepreneur. That is an interesting little twist we'll probably get into. His personal mission is to educate and help eradicate generational poverty by helping entrepreneurs create thriving businesses, which is why he wrote the #1 bestseller, Survive and Thrive, How to Build a Profitable Business in Any Economy, including this one. So I love that. I love that. He's also the CEO of Cowork Inc., and we talked about that, and we'll talk about that, and co-founder of Notable and host of the Thrive School podcast. So John, that is John on paper.
Yes.
Like, tell us something that's not on paper about John.
Well, there's a few things. Okay, so a couple. What's not on paper? I'm really I've always been a nerd, but I guess maybe that's not very surprising. I did like the homeschool chess club thing and stuff like that. I have always been really dedicated to my family. From the time I was 13, I was looking forward to being a dad. And now I'm married to my high school best friend, not my high school sweetheart, because we never dated in high school. I was always in the friend zone, but we're married and have 3 beautiful boys. And we've now known each other. My wife and I have known each other now for more than half our lives. And that's pretty cool. And so, so with those 3 boys, I train jujitsu.
Okay.
So that's probably the most unknown thing about me, I suppose, is that I do both myself and my kids. We train jiu-jitsu, although they got their stripes before I did. So they're technically outrank me right now. I'm not sure how I feel. But my 6-year-old outranks me. Yeah. And
pretty soon they'll be able to take you, John. Just so you know, they'll be able to take you.
They already think they can, but
yeah, they do. Well, so John, let's start off with your entrepreneurial journey. And I know a lot about your trajectory because I followed you, and you also filled in some blanks when we were talking. So let's start with how did you get into being an entrepreneur? Where did that start? Because I always find that it's usually way before we ever became an entrepreneur. So what kind of stimulated that juice?
Well, I mean, now it's easy to kind of retrace my history as a child and kind of find seeds of oh yeah, I guess I was kind of entrepreneurial. Because I when I was 6 or 7, I got popsicle sticks and glued them together and colored them. So it was a little cross. And then I went around and sold them to my neighbors for a couple dollars. And so there's things like that. A lot of people have stories of that where oh yeah, I guess I was an entrepreneur as a kid. But I didn't really recognize that. And I'm a first generation college student. So I come from a family of a history of bad money decisions. And I was supposed to be the guy who changed it all by going off to college, being a first generation college student, changing the world, changing the family story. And I studied economics. And then I graduated. I got a couple pieces of paper that say I knew some things. And yeah, it didn't really have the same effect I was expecting. There weren't just there was not a pot of gold at the end of graduation. And I really got frustrated by that because I'm supposed to change things. This is my job. I was the oldest child of this family, And so I started asking myself, really just going on this deep dive of okay, if it's not college, if that's not the thing that changes families forever, what is? And I fell in love with entrepreneurship, but that was kind of accidental. I stumbled through my economics research. I worked for an economics research lab for a while, which is about the nerdiest thing you could possibly do on the planet, I think. And then I just kind of fell in love with business first, and then realizing the people behind business are people with dreams and hopes and fears, with a vision for a better world that they want to help make happen. And then I realized that my dad had been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I just never recognized that because he was a painting contractor. And yeah, so I've now fallen in love with entrepreneurship as my life mission to help eradicate generational poverty, specifically where families get stuck in the cycle of passing down poverty from one family to the next, just like other families pass down wealth. That the best way to change that course is to start a business. Your business doesn't care about your age, race, whether you have $5 or $5,000 in the bank account, or gender or any of that. All your business cares about is, can you create a real solution to a real problem for real people? And that's what the good business is built on.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Your business, it doesn't matter where you are, race, none of that matters in creating business. I love that. I love that. So let's talk about that entrepreneurial journey. What's been the biggest surprise for you being an entrepreneur?
What's been the biggest surprise for me? Okay, so entrepreneurship specifically has a weird relationship in our culture where it's simultaneously glorified. So like the celebrities of today are people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and like entrepreneurs. I mean, Steve Jobs, they're like the celebrities and like the idols of modern culture. And yet everyday entrepreneurship is kind of poo-pooed, like the person that owns that one like clothing boutique or secondhand, thrift store in your town. They're kind of like treated as like second-class citizens of like, that they're just like, they're not doing like real work. And so there's this really weird tension of like, you're either, as an entrepreneur, people are like not really sure if they love you or hate you, but they're just not sure what to do with you. And so that was surprising. That was surprising for sure.
So along your journey, like what's the biggest ceiling that you've hit that maybe you struggled a little bit to break through, and maybe you didn't break through it? I'm sure you did. And what did you learn?
Oh, that's a big question. The biggest struggled in getting through. Okay, so I think it's easiest for me to tell it through the lens of kind of what I've learned.
Yes.
Which is that the difference in the thinking and philosophy of an employee and an entrepreneur, in my mind, of course, there's lots of things you could argue that there are differences in how employees think and entrepreneurs think. But I would say that at the center of them, at the center and the core is, are you focused on input or output? And that's a key shift that I had to make to be able to grow as an entrepreneur. Because employees are compensated for input. If you, make enough chicken sandwiches or work enough hours or push the buttons you're supposed to push, you get paid, whether or not it makes a difference at the end of the day. Of course, if you're in a job that you enjoy, that you're doing and that you're good at, you're driving results. But generally, like, you're paid regardless, right? You're compensated for input, like do more things. Like productivity, kind of like traditional philosophy of productivity is like check off more tasks. Right. And that's how employees get paid. Generally, this is an oversimplification, I'm sure, but entrepreneurs, on the other hand, get paid for output. In other words, it doesn't matter if you spend 100 hours, 1,000 hours, or 1 hour on a project. All that matters is, did it drive results? And so that meant that I had to shift from thinking about doing more tasks to evaluating every task based on the potential output and deciding that there's lots of things like, getting to inbox 0 every day, or being super responsive on Slack, or, having a great, or just like doing the tasks that I say I'm going to do, like, cause I'm a very high follow through person. Those are all those things that as an employee, maybe a really good employee, but I actually had to retrain my habits as a good employee to become a good entrepreneur, where there's things now where like I might go a week where my inbox never gets to inbox 0. And that is actually because I'm focusing on the things that drive value and revenue in my business. Even though I still flinch as I say that out loud,
Well, we have to choose different priorities, right? As entrepreneurs, and that's how you grow and break through ceilings and scale. So you've had the opportunity. You were a part of Platform University, the dean of Platform University. That was our first basic interaction.
Yes.
So you got to work with thousands of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
What did you see were some of the biggest challenges and mistakes that people made in that journey of you being on the other side of it?
Well, I can say the input output thing I just shared, that's where it came from, really, because this was true in my own practice, but I didn't really recognize that until I started coaching. I mean, when I was the dean of Platform University, as you know, Pat, then, we had, I was writing a weekly newsletter to an email list of over 100,000 subscribers, doing live video every week to, thousands of paying customers. And everything was about teaching about how to build essentially your online business. And so it's all business stuff. But the input output thing came up a lot in terms of like making sure it didn't matter if you did all the tasks, if you didn't focus on the things that drive results. You don't get paid for, having a pretty WordPress website, like, whatever.
Right.
But it's, as far as some other things that came up, I got to think about that.
What was their biggest challenge in scaling, as part of that?
Like specifically
entrepreneurs that you've come across, that you've worked with, maybe, been involved with.
Yeah, well, there's a real tension to this, is that, and this is not an original quote. I'm sure it's like Aristotle or someone that said this, but, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm sorry, I don't remember who originally said that, but I think about that quote a good bit, because that's a constant battle and tension in entrepreneurship. Because when you first get started as an entrepreneur, you sort of walk away from, in like a job, you've got you've got teams and even bosses and employees and managers and direct reports and customers. You've got all these people. The minute you become an entrepreneur, you're alone.
Right.
And you can choose to grow a business alone. I've got a company back on that shelf called Company of One from Paul Jarvis, which is a great book on if you want to build a business as a solopreneur. But there are some serious drawbacks in doing that. Now, I'm not no offense against Paul. He actually talks about this in his book. But when you don't have any resources, there are things you have to do. You have to be bad. You have to choose to ignore a ton of things you care about to focus on the things that matter, that are the most crucial in your business, to drive enough revenue to bring on a team. Because until you can, and that doesn't mean a full-time employee necessarily. Right. I just now hired my first full-time operations director. This is his first week as an integrator on my team. And I've had full-time employees before, but this is the biggest full-time role I've ever hired for. But being able to identify that there's work that you can outsource to contractors for, $10 an hour, $15 an hour, or $100 an hour, which are all good rates, by the way.
Right.
Then that's a key mindset shift. And it's also really challenging to find that balance of like, okay, there's some things that when you're first getting started, don't spend much money on outsourcing things. Just there's a lot of things that just need to not get done, even though you feel like they should happen. Ignore them, focus on the things that drive revenue, and then use that revenue to grow your business by outsourcing strategically. That's something a lot of people struggle with, and that's on a lot of my clients that I work with. That's technically, I usually come in and I'm usually focused on marketing strategy. I have business partners that do finance and operations. So the three of us will often come into a company and kind of with that three-pronged approach. But even though I'm giving marketing strategy, a good bit of that is like, you should stop doing this, and actually just like outsource this part and then focus on this, Yeah,
I love it. Well, and sometimes that's hard to see, right? Because we're, if we're like the restaurant, we're the dishwasher, we're the cook, we're the, hostess, we're the front desk person, we're the, person who orders the materials. So let's dial a shift a little bit and talk about, so you're with Platform University, you came into that organization with a specific purpose and in somewhat of an end game, as we talked about in the beginning. And so now you make that transition. And so like you now have a clean slate. Why did you decide to do what you're doing right now?
Well, so for anybody who doesn't know, we sold Platform University. Like that was kind of like my secret mission when I was the dean of Platform University, was also to prepare it to sell it to another buyer. So that's done. That we sold actually a year ago on Sunday. So the Pete Vargas, who owns it now, I stayed working with them for a little bit as a consultant just to help with the transition, but they're off and doing their own thing now, which is great.
Right.
But I knew before Platform University that entrepreneurship was something I cared about. But while I worked there, and that was my full-time job, was just serving entrepreneurs, specifically personal brand entrepreneurs at the time. I just was just fired up about that. And so I knew that I wanted to do that more. But also, I live in a small town in Columbia, Tennessee. It's the mule capital of the world, if you'll believe it. A mule is in a half horse, and a half, we'll say, donkey. So that's a mule, and this is the mule capital of the world. We have a Mule Day celebration every year. People come from all over the world, literally, to see what's the latest.
Learn something new today. Mule capital of the world.
Yes. Just as an aside, just one of the many fun facts I could tell you about mules by living here. In World War I, before America technically entered the war, 40,000 mules had left Columbia, Tennessee, to go serve on the war front, and the British Army had a full-time post here in Columbia just to inspect mules before they sent them off.
Wow.
So,
interesting.
World War I was unique like that because there were like tanks and mules and planes and wagons,
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So, but living in a small town, I got to see. So when I was teaching Platform University, I would like finish a webinar where I'm teaching thousands of people about how to build an online business, all the latest marketing techniques and strategies, and it's cool and it's exciting. And then I would walk downstairs in downtown Columbia, town of, I know we have 100,000 people in our county. I don't know how many people are in our city exactly off the top of my head, but that's still relatively small. It's not tiny, but it's small. And I would go down to our coffee shop here in town and grab coffee and start chatting with local business owners who had no idea what I did. No idea. And I felt like there was this real disconnect. I felt like the stuff that I was teaching to online entrepreneurs needed to really be taught to everyday entrepreneurs, but there was these struggling small business owners who really just had no idea what best practices were that we're teaching to bloggers and podcasters and stuff like that.
Right.
So I wanted to shift that, which is why I got into the co-working business. So my core business, right now we have one flagship co-working space. We're in the process of we're working on 2 others right now, but the goal is really that over the next several years, we'll expand that to have more in the region and then potentially, eventually the nation and then the world, everywhere.
Exactly.
But is to have these physical embassies where a small business owner, whether they're building an online business or an offline business, could go in, and yes, it's a co-working space. So you have a place to work if you want a conference room to meet with clients, or if you want a place where you can sit down and work on your own stuff on your laptop, or if you want a private office, we've got that too. But it's really not just about that. That's about creating a gathering place for entrepreneurs so we can have training programs and classes to really help entrepreneurs thrive. Because I genuinely believe that when entrepreneurs thrive, the world becomes a better place. Yeah. Because entrepreneurs solve problems for a profit. And we have plenty of problems to solve. So
we sure do. We got to get on that supply chain problem.
Yeah, that one's going to take a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have a quick fix for that one. But
neither does anybody else, John. So we're all in trouble, right? I don't know how we're going to solve that. So let's talk about, so you now go into this co-work, and I love the concept, by the way. I think it is so needed, and entrepreneurs, where there's a void in the market, entrepreneurs will fill it. And I think it's just an amazing opportunity. So you now, so you shift gears, you move away from Platform University, and you write a book. Like,
oh yeah, I did that.
Like, everybody wants to write a book, and very few people actually do.
Yes, the math is actually that over 80% of people in any room, you ask, do you want to write a book in your lifetime? And 80% of the hands will go up. But less than 1% actually less than 1% of people publish a book in their lifetime, which is honestly sad. Yeah. Because there's so much wisdom that people carry with them that, kind of gets lost, as lives change. But regardless, I did it now. I published my first book, second book's on the way. The next 7 books are in production. But so I'm addicted to it now. But I knew I wanted to write a book for a while. I love writing. I've kind of blogged for almost a decade. I've had a blog or a podcast or a newsletter of some kind for most of that decade. But I didn't really know exactly what to write about. Like I actually had an outline of a book idea called Essentialist Marketing that I wanted to write. And I'd written the first couple chapters of it, but then it kind of was just sitting on, collecting dust on Google Drive.
Sure.
And then the lockdown hit. And just to put this in context, I opened my first co-working space January 15th, 2020, 58 days before lockdown. And we were closed by executive order in our state. And we were closed for 48 days after being open for 58. Not a great start to my brick and mortar adventure.
No.
But during that time, I was sitting in my office, this office right here, actually, this office is in the co-working space. And I was just sitting here empty. I mean, I posted a video on YouTube of just what it looks like in downtown Columbia during the lockdown, of just like everything was closed. Everything, right. It was so eerie, just like a ghost town. And I realized by looking at all these different businesses that people's livelihoods were at stake. The business owners and their employees and the things we count on. I mean, as people who live in towns, we want access to good food and good clothing and good entertainment, all those kind of things. All of that was at stake. And I realized, and I sent an email to my email list that week saying, this is a triple crisis. Everyone's talking about the health. This is, you got to put yourself back in March 2020 brain space to think about this a little bit. But it was a physical health crisis. People were freaking out about, are we going to die? What do we do? There's no vaccine. There's no, can we do anything? Should we just all be locked in our houses for a year? I mean, there's a real health crisis that was going on, but because of all the scare, all the fear and anxiety, I knew there was also going to be a mental health crisis, but I also knew I'm qualified to solve that. I'm actually working, with and advising companies that can help with that, but I myself am not a mental health professional or a physical health professional. But there was a third crisis that I could help with, and that's the economic crisis. And that's where I knew that there was no way you could turn it off and turn it back on again without dramatic implications. Of course, you're seeing that with the supply chain, as you mentioned, Pat,
Right.
of like there's the arrogance of some bureaucrats that you could turn off the supply chain and turn it back on and expect it to work smoothly. It just means that there's just no understanding of really the amount of human ingenuity that goes into creating the world we depend on.
Yeah.
And so I knew that there would be catastrophic loss, and there was. Last year, so some businesses close all the time. That's just part of the life cycle of anything. But last year, 200,000 businesses closed in the US that didn't have to. An extra 200,000 more than, and that's not, and you think about that, that's 200,000 hopes, dreams, emergency funds, life savings, late nights, long weekends, tears of joy and tears of sorrow. That's 200,000 businesses that employed families who have kids, and it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it was an interesting time, right? And now you look back on it, and we can all look back on it and go, should it have happened the way that it did, and what could we have done different? And because You're right, people, you'd hear stories of people working building 30, 40 years, and it was gone in a matter of weeks or months. And So go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say about that. So I've never been one, like, I like to review the past and go, man, okay, what can we do moving forward? Because it turns out we're all time travelers. We just go one direction, one day at a time forward.
Right.
And so we can't go back. So that's not, in my mind, like, I knew that wasn't going to be useful to spend my time going, man, I really wish what had happened was. So instead I said, okay, moving forward, what can we do? And so I wanted to create a playbook that any business owner can create a business that's unshakable. Where you have an unshakable core in your business where if something crazy like what happened in 2020 happens again, you're going to be okay. But also so that you can thrive and rebuild the world in the wake of that tragedy. Right. And so that's what this book is. So I wrote this book. The first draft was my take on, okay, I built 3 businesses from scratch now. Here's how I recommend you do it. But then before I published it, I went and I interviewed 30 of what I thought were the best and brightest minds in business today to get their perspective and include that in the book too. So that way it was 3-dimensional. It wasn't just John's way to build a business.
Right.
And then I put on my nerd glasses and I did a deep dive into the economic research about what the long-term economic impacts were and how things were changing. And so my editor told me this was excessive for a 200-page book to have 116 citations, but that just seemed like good, research to me.
Right. Supporting material. I love it.
Yes. So it's a book that's got the 3-dimensional expertise of my personal experience, dozens of successful entrepreneurs, including Michael Hyatt, Ray Edwards, Pat Flynn, Philip Stutz, Robert Daniel Lappin, Casey Graham, many, many others. And then really just taking what are the core principles that are common to building a business, not just like a bunch of stories, but how do you actually turn this into what's a playbook that you can pick this up. One of the first reviews for the book was that it's a weekend MBA. You know nothing about business. You read this book, you know a lot about business. So that's what it's for.
Okay, so let's make a transition. You've got it prepared for this. So what's the best advice that you've been given? And did you follow it, and what did you learn?
Yeah, well, I thought about this. You told me this was coming, and thankfully I've received a lot of good advice over the years. I'm not sure what it's hard to say what the best one was, but one that comes to mind that is definitely one of the best. Really just probably Pat Flynn's probably the person that drove this home for the most for me, which is that your business is built on people, and it seems kind of like obvious. Right. But he really, really is the one who changed my perspective in terms of looking at business as a service for people. And so now my whole philosophy is about businesses built on creating real solutions to real problems for real people. That's my language, but it probably comes from Pat Flynn's inspiration. And the best advice was to focus on the people. And so I think that's probably the best advice that I've taken that's gone well, is that it's so easy to get caught up, especially as your business starts to grow. You're like, okay, we've got 1,000 followers or 2,000 customers or 500. No, you've got real people, human beings, and you just have to come back to that. And so that's helped me, and I have to come back to it periodically because then I get busy and I forget, like, oh yeah, have I actually talked to any of my customers directly in a while? No, I probably need to like make a phone call or jump on. And Pat Flynn does this. He has a massive business. I mean, multi-million-dollar business with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and a sizable team. And every single month, at least once a month, he meets on a Zoom call with a random customer just to talk to them and learn more about them.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty great advice, by the way.
Yeah.
So you've also been prepared for this. We're going to flip that upside down and go, what's the absolute worst advice that you've ever been given that hopefully you didn't follow? And if you did, what did you learn?
I did not follow it. The worst advice I got was when I worked at Chewy's, which is a Tex-Mex restaurant chain,
Yep.
which is kind of a fun job in college. And I did great at it. And I got as far up as I could in the quote food chain while working at the restaurant as an expo. And then the general manager sat me down and he said, congratulations, we've selected you to go. We're going to send you out to Texas for this, 12-week training program, and then you're going to be a store manager, and we want to promote you. And I was like, that's awesome, and he was like, yeah, you got to go out. Can you leave next week? And I was like, well, I'm in college. He's like, oh, no, like you'd have to drop out of college actually. And so I'm like, at this point, like in my third year of like my economics degree, and I was like, well, like, could we do it over the summer? And he was like, well, no. I mean, and honestly, even if we did, we expect managers to have 100% availability. So we couldn't work around your college classes. So you'd have to drop out. Either way, like, whatever. And I remember I told him, I was like, well, but I'm in college because I want to like, get ahead and like do things. And like, thank you. I'm honored that at like, 20, you want to pick me as like a store manager. That's great. But, and he just said, look, what do you think you're going to get elsewhere? He said, here you're talking to me. And then last week you were talking to the VP of the company when he was here visiting. And so like, you're only, 2 people away from the top of the company. You think you're going to get better than that?
Oh my.
So thankfully I did not take his advice. I said, thank you.
Right.
But no. And I went as far up as you can actually in the company. I started my own. And so I'm at the top of the company.
Yeah, you're at the top. You're at the top. Yep. You don't have to go far to talk with the top.
Yeah, exactly. Just a mirror. I just need a mirror.
Yeah, there you go. Well, John, first of all, you've delivered amazing value today, and I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Like, I'm going to do a little PSA, a little cleanup, and then I'm going to ask you for your final thought. And I know you got some things to share with our guests as well. So, folks, thank you so much for supporting our show. Whether you're watching it on YouTube, whether you're live, or whether you're subscribing at your favorite podcast source, we are at all of them. So you can also go to www.thesuccessascent.com and you can listen to our episodes and subscribe there. So, John, I asked you to be prepared for this. What's one final thought you would share with our listeners? And I leave this wide open so you can take it wherever you'd like.
I think, well, first of all, I'll say that one of the cool things about publishing a book is that on Kindle, when people, if someone on their Kindle, they highlight the phrase, I could pull up on Kindle and view the most highlighted phrases in the book.
Oh,
and so it's sort of like I can get like a study of like what people actually find to be the most valuable. And the phrase that's really the most people have highlighted is that I personally view profit as a scorecard for how well I've served humanity. And so that would be the final thought that I'd like to share, because I think culturally, whether it be like in the Christian South where we've got all kinds of baggage, or just like in the world at large where, wealthy people are disparaged, it can be really, as you start to become an entrepreneur, there's all this guilt of like, how much should I charge? And like, should I make money and all that kind of stuff? And I just would encourage you to reframe that all of the success and accomplishment we enjoy in this world is built on the backs of entrepreneurs who've gone forward and created a better world and solved problems. And so because of that, once you recognize that your business is creating real solutions to real problems for real people, I want you to look at the profit that you've made in your business as a scorecard. And say, okay, that's how well I've currently served humanity. And there's a lot more problems to solve. Have you done enough?
Yeah.
Have you done enough?
No.
Celebrate the scorecard that you've got right now, but please grow it, increase it. Yeah. And I hope that also helps you just celebrate the growth of your business without the guilt that keeps you trapped in thinking small.
Well, and there's a lot of people in today's world that judge a lot of that. And that's we could, like you said, we could probably do a year podcast on that whole conversation, right? Yeah. So it's a great thought. I mean, it's a great way to look at it. And without profit, the business closes. And so, there's also the inverse of that. So I'm scrolling down at the bottom of your website to get the book. And so what else are they going to get if they go there?
Well, if you go to survivingthrive.book.com, you get a copy of the book, but I also have some free resources to go with it, like a fill-in-the-blank playbook, essentially like a one-page business plan, for you to use to grow your business. But you can also see there are other places where you can find me and subscribe to the Thrive School podcast, or, check me out. LinkedIn is the only social media platform I'm on. There's a whole section on my book on why I'm not on the other social media platforms, but you'll have to read that.
I love that. Well, and that will be the first chapter, right? Is that, because isn't that changing today too, and everything going on there? So, John, first of all, again, thank you so much for your time. I know how valuable it is, and I just appreciate everything you've given today. I know our listeners are going to enjoy it. So I just want to personally tell you how grateful I am that you spent the time with us.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and please keep up the good work.
Well, thank you so much. And as I end every show, everybody, be happy, be healthy, be safe until the next time we see you. Take care. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to The Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next Ascent.